Let's not waste time. The question is simple, but the answer carries the weight of a nation's trust. Did you lie? Because when someone steps into a role of leadership, especially at the highest level, they don't just inherit authority, they inherit responsibility. With every word spoken to the public, there's an unspoken contract being signed. That contract says, I'll be honest with you. I'll tell you the truth even when it's hard. But when that promise is broken, it's not just trust that gets damaged. It's the foundation of democracy that takes the hit. We're not dealing with private mistakes or harmless exaggerations here. We're talking about words broadcasted to millions, statements that shaped policy, guided behavior, and influenced lives. This isn't a matter of poor communication. If your words led people down a path you knew was misleading, then we're not in the realm of accident. We're in the realm of intentional deceit. And the public deserves better than half answers or carefully worded denials. Let's break this down. There's a massive difference between getting something wrong and knowing it's wrong when you say it. Ignorance can be forgiven, it can be corrected, but if you stood behind a podium and knowingly delivered falsehoods, that's not a mistake. That's a betrayal. That's knowingly playing with the lives, livelihoods, and mental well-being of people who put their trust in you. So the question becomes, were you mistaken or were you dishonest? People made decisions based on your word. They changed plans, spent money, took risks, stayed home, got sick, lost loved ones. Some of them are still paying the price, so don't tell me this is just politics. Don't act like this is business as usual. This is personal. For every family that's still grieving, every small business that closed its doors, and every kid who missed a year of school, your words mattered. They had consequences. You can't lead without accountability. You don't get to shrug off questions or hide behind vague phrasing. You don't get to say, well, that was then, or things were complicated. What people want now is the truth, not rehearsed lines, not PR-crafted apologies. Just truth. If you made a mistake, own it. If you lied, admit it. If you didn't, prove it. But don't sit there and pretend that nothing happened. People are not fools. There's still a chance to do the right thing. You can't erase the past, but you can face it. You can choose to speak honestly now, not because it's politically smart, but because it's morally right. This is your moment to show the country what kind of leader you really are. Not when everything is easy, but when the pressure is high and the spotlight is blinding. That's when character is revealed. So let me ask again, not for the cameras, not for ratings, but for every person out there who's still waiting for closure, did you lie to the nation? Or are you ready to step up and tell the truth, not for your legacy, but for the people who deserve it, because now, let's look at the facts, not opinions, not speculation, just what was said, when it was said, and how it impacted the people who heard it. When words come from a position of power, they carry weight, sometimes more than even actions. So if what you said created confusion, led to division, or resulted in harm, then you don't get to brush it off with a casual "I misspoke." That doesn't cut it. You don't get to minimize the consequences by pretending the intentions were harmless. When you're in a position where your words guide millions, you're responsible for every ripple those words create. Let's be clear, the truth doesn't shift based on convenience or popularity. It doesn't bend to serve your narrative. Either you knew the facts when you spoke, or you chose to ignore them. Either way, that choice had consequences. If people suffered because they believed what you said, then they have every right to ask for accountability. This isn't about attacking anyone. It's about asking whether the truth mattered to you in that moment, or whether you decided that optics were more important than honesty. Because here's the thing, once the damage is done, it doesn't matter if the lie was big or small, deliberate or careless. The people affected don't get the luxury of rewinding time. The small business owner who lost everything because of a false sense of security can't just start over. The family that followed your lead and ended up suffering irreparable loss can't undo that pain. Words have power, and when they're used irresponsibly, they can destroy more than just trust. They can destroy lives. You can't stand in front of the country and make bold claims, then retreat into silence when those claims are proven false. That's not leadership, that's evasion. You don't get to act surprised when people demand answers. They're not being unreasonable, they're being rational. They want to understand why the person they trusted gave them false comfort, or false hope, or false fear. The least you can do now is meet that demand with clarity and honesty. It's easy to speak with conviction when you think you won't be held accountable, but real strength comes from owning your words after the fact, from saying, "Yes, I said that," and then explaining why. If the facts changed, say so. If you didn't know better at the time, admit it. But if you did know and still went ahead, then don't hide behind excuses. The truth will always matter more than your public image. Every public statement you made had the power to influence thought, policy, and emotion. And when that kind of power is misused, whether intentionally or recklessly, the trust that held the nation together begins to erode. Once trust is gone, it takes more than apologies to get it back. It takes accountability, humility, and a deep understanding of the responsibility you once held. You may no longer feel the weight of that responsibility, but those affected still carry the burden. So now we circle back to the core of the issue. This isn't about punishing you. It's about acknowledging reality. The facts are in front of us, and your response will shape what comes next. Did your words mislead the nation? Did you speak without truth as your guide? You owe an answer not just to the critics, but to every person who acted in good faith, not because they were naive, but because they believed you were telling the truth. There's a critical distinction that must be made, one that separates an honest mistake from a deliberate act of deception. It's the difference between getting something wrong because you didn't know better and saying something you knew was false the moment it left your mouth. That line matters because one is rooted in human fallibility and the other is rooted in manipulation. The public can accept imperfection. They can understand that no one has all the answers all the time. But what they cannot and should not accept is being knowingly misled. Ignorance can be corrected. It can be addressed with humility, with a willingness to learn and take responsibility. If you were misinformed and acted on that misinformation, then it's your duty to come forward and clarify. That doesn't erase the consequences, but it shows respect for those who listened to you, believed you, and followed your guidance. It shows that your goal was to serve the people, not to preserve your own image or protect an agenda. On the other hand, if what was said was known to be untrue, then we're not talking about a slip. We're talking about a choice, a conscious decision to abandon truth in favor of control, convenience, or narrative. And that kind of decision doesn't just mislead, it damages. It breaks the silent bond between leader and listener, between public figure and the public trust. Once broken, that bond isn't easy to repair, and in some cases it never fully recovers. What makes this so serious is the scale of the influence. These weren't private conversations. These weren't words spoken in passing or in closed rooms. They were declarations delivered with confidence, meant to guide the behavior of millions. That kind of reach demands an equally powerful sense of responsibility. If the message wasn't anchored in truth, then the damage spreads far wider than any one individual could possibly calculate. The people deserved to know the truth at the moment it mattered. Not after the fallout, not once the consequences had already played out. If deception occurred, it was done at a time when clarity and honesty were needed most. And if that's the case, then no amount of post-fact explanations can undo the effects of that betrayal. The harm isn't just to facts, it's to lives, to decision-making, to the very fabric of collective trust. In times of uncertainty, people look for clarity. They want to believe the people in charge are acting in their best interest, telling them what's real even when it's uncomfortable. That belief isn't given freely, it's earned, and if it turns out that the words spoken during that time were knowingly false, then the weight of that choice is immense. It suggests a willingness to put narrative above reality, control above compassion, and image above integrity. So the question remains, and it's not going away: was it ignorance or was it deception? Did you simply not know, or did you choose to ignore what you knew to be true? Because the answer doesn't just define your actions, it defines your character. And in moments of reckoning, character is the only currency that truly matters. There's a line that separates a mistake from a lie, and that line is called intent. When someone says something that isn't true, the first question we must ask is simple: did they know it was false when they said it? If the answer is no, then we're dealing with ignorance. That doesn't mean there aren't consequences, but it does mean there's room for understanding. People can only act based on what they know at the time. But if the answer is yes, if the speaker knew the truth and chose to say something different, then that's deception, plain and simple. Ignorance is a human flaw. It can happen to anyone. People misread data, misinterpret information, or make decisions under pressure. In those moments, admitting you were wrong is not weakness, it's maturity. It's an opportunity to set the record straight and to grow from the experience. People will forgive a misstep if they believe it came from an honest place. They'll give grace to someone who owns their errors and shows a willingness to correct them. Deception, however, is something entirely different. It is not rooted in confusion or uncertainty. It is rooted in control. It is a decision to hide, twist, or replace the truth for personal, political, or strategic gain. And when someone speaks a lie, knowing it's a lie, and watches others act on that lie without stepping in to correct it, they are no longer leading, they are manipulating. That is not a lapse in judgment, that is a betrayal. When people in positions of influence choose deception, they are gambling with public trust. They are placing their own interest above the collective good. It may seem like a smart move in the short term, but the long-term cost is always higher. Trust once broken is incredibly hard to rebuild, and if someone knowingly lied when people were relying on their guidance, the wound from that lie runs deep and takes time to heal, if it ever does. We have to consider the consequences of that kind of deception. A false statement at the wrong time can lead to real harm: missed opportunities, misguided decisions, emotional distress, and even loss of life. The cost isn't just political or reputational, it's personal. People change the course of their lives based on what they believe to be true, and if that truth was denied them deliberately, the responsibility for those outcomes lies with the one who withheld it. The difference between ignorance and deception is not subtle, it's massive. One implies that someone didn't know better and is now willing to admit it. The other implies they did know better and chose to act otherwise. This is not just a matter of technicality, it's a matter of ethics. It's about whether the person speaking valued the people listening or only valued their own position. That's why the truth matters, even after the moment has passed. So the real question that must be asked again and again until it's answered is this: was it ignorance or was it deception? Because these are not the same. One may be forgivable, the other demands accountability. And the people deserve to know which one it was, not just for closure, but to protect the integrity of truth going forward. That clarity is not a luxury, it's a necessity. Would you demand that they come forward and give the public the clarity they deserve? Would you hold them accountable, or would you turn a blind eye simply because it was politically convenient or personally comfortable to do so? It's easy to set a standard for others, but real integrity is measured by whether you're willing to live by that same standard yourself. Imagine if a public figure you disagreed with said something false that shaped national behavior and caused serious consequences. Would you hesitate to point it out? Would you give them the benefit of the doubt? Or would you scrutinize every word, every intention, every decision? Chances are you'd be on the front lines, demanding transparency, calling for answers, insisting that truth and accountability must prevail over spin and damage control. But when the scrutiny falls on your own words, on your own actions, the tendency is to minimize, to excuse, to redirect. Suddenly, the same standards that felt so reasonable when applied to someone else begin to feel unfair. That's human nature, but it's also dangerous, because once we allow truth to become flexible depending on who's involved, we erode the very foundation of fairness and justice. The truth doesn't change based on who's in the spotlight. So now it comes down to this. Are you willing to be consistent in what you demand of others and what you demand of yourself? That's not an easy question to answer honestly, especially when reputation, legacy, or influence is on the line. But the public isn't asking for perfection. They're asking for honesty. They're asking for the same level of transparency you would expect if you were in their position, watching someone else face the same questions. This isn't about playing gotcha. This is about applying a universal principle that everyone, no matter their position or power, should be held to the same ethical standard. If the facts are the same, then the response should be the same. And if someone else would be expected to answer for misleading the public, then so should you. Anything less is hypocrisy, and the public can see through that faster than any speech or press release can cover. The test of character is not how we act when everything is going our way, but how we respond when we're the ones being questioned. When you sit in that seat and face the same demands you once made of others, do you meet them with the same conviction? Or do you try to justify your actions in a way you would never allow if the situation were flipped? That's the true mirror, and it reflects more than just political truth. It reveals personal values. So I ask again, without accusation, but with full expectation of an honest answer, what would you say if it weren't you in the hot seat? What would you demand of the person who made these statements, influenced this many people, and now faces this level of public scrutiny? Because the answer to that question might be the most revealing truth of all. We are not talking about a private conversation between friends, whispered behind closed doors with no real consequence beyond personal opinions. This isn't something that can be dismissed as a misunderstanding between individuals. What we are dealing with is a message delivered to an entire nation, repeated across media channels, amplified in official statements, and woven into the framework of policy and public action. When words carry that much reach, they stop being personal. They become national. These were not isolated remarks or moments of off-the-cuff commentary. They were deliberate addresses given with preparation and purpose, meant to inform, guide, and persuade. And when those messages form the basis of decisions made by schools, businesses, hospitals, and everyday citizens, they take on a life of their own. The speaker, then, is not just a person. They become a symbol of leadership and authority. So if the message itself is false, it doesn't just mislead, it corrupts the very role of leadership. The danger in lying at that level is not just the damage it causes in the moment, but how it reshapes the entire system built upon it. If the foundation of a building is cracked, every floor above it is at risk. In the same way, if a policy, directive, or national attitude was built on falsehoods, then the consequences affect everyone connected to it. People make choices based on what they believe to be true, and when that belief is manipulated, their actions, no matter how well-intentioned, can have devastating outcomes. What happens when entire institutions, from public health to national security, are built on claims that were never true? The integrity of those systems is compromised. Decisions made under false pretenses ripple outward, distorting the public's faith in leadership, in science, in government. That damage doesn't simply fade over time, it settles into the public consciousness, breeding doubt, fear, and resentment. And it creates a legacy that is far harder to undo than the lie itself. There is also the issue of precedent. When a lie goes unchecked at the national level, it signals to others in power that truth is optional. It sends a message that success is not measured by honesty, but by how well one can maintain a false narrative. That is a dangerous message, and it doesn't stop with one person or one administration. It spreads, infecting the culture of leadership and redefining what it means to serve the people. Even worse, the public starts to adapt. People become cynical, no longer expecting honesty, no longer trusting institutions. They begin to question everything, not just what was false, but what was true. That's the true cost of lying to a nation. It erodes the very foundation of democracy, informed consent, because when people are misled, they are not consenting. They are being manipulated, used, and misdirected. So we come back to the fundamental point. If the foundation was a lie, then the entire structure must be re-examined. We cannot continue to build upon something that was never stable to begin with. The truth must be uncovered, acknowledged, and addressed. Only then can we begin the process of rebuilding trust, policy, and leadership on ground that is once again solid, transparent, and accountable. People believed you. They didn't just hear your words, they trusted them. They rearranged their lives, adjusted their plans, and made critical decisions for their families based on what you said. That trust wasn't given lightly. It was earned over time, built on the assumption that someone in your position would prioritize truth over appearance, facts over convenience. And when that trust is broken, it doesn't just vanish quietly. It shatters, and the sound echoes across homes, workplaces, and communities. Some lost jobs, others lost savings, many lost time they can never get back. But the deepest cut of all came to those who lost loved ones. People listened to your words and acted on them, believing they were doing the right thing, believing the information was reliable. If what you said was not grounded in truth, then the results were not just mistakes, they were tragedies. And those are not numbers in a report. They are people with names, faces, and stories that will never be the same. This is what makes the consequences so profound. They are not just political fallout or drops in public approval. They are deeply human costs. When you occupy a position of influence, your words are not just statements. They are instructions. And when those instructions are flawed by dishonesty or omission, people don't just lose faith in you, they lose their sense of direction, security, and in some cases, their very safety. These are not theoretical harms. These are real-world outcomes. A mother who skipped a final goodbye because she believed the information she was told. A business owner who closed their doors permanently, thinking there was no other option. A child who missed a crucial milestone because of actions taken under guidance they believed was rooted in truth. These are the moments where truth matters most, and when it's absent, the pain it causes is irreversible. This is why people are angry. This is why they're demanding answers. It's not about scoring political points or stirring up controversy. It's about looking at the pain they experienced and asking a fair question: was it necessary? Could it have been avoided? And if so, who bears responsibility for the words that led them into that suffering? These aren't attacks. They're the cries of people trying to understand how they were failed and why. When someone in power misleads the public, the damage extends far beyond a single headline or news cycle. It ripples into the choices people make, into the way they see the world, and into the trust they place in future leaders. And once that trust is broken, every future message, no matter how honest, is met with skepticism. The damage isn't just in what was said, it's in what can never be fully restored. So now the moment of reckoning is here. People are not demanding perfection. They are not asking for a flawless record. What they want is honesty. They want someone to look them in the eye and say, "This is what happened. This is what I knew. This is where I failed. Because when pain is ignored, it deepens. But when it's acknowledged, when it's met with truth, there's a chance, however small, to begin healing. So here's your chance, right now, to stop hiding behind carefully chosen words and polished public relations. To drop the performance and speak plainly, the people are not asking for theatrics or deflection, they're asking for honesty. That kind of honesty takes courage, especially when it threatens your image, your legacy, or your position. But if you still believe in any sense of duty to the nation, then this is the moment to prove it. Not through strategy, but through truth. The question is not whether people will forgive you for being human. The question is whether you will give them the respect of an honest answer. Yes, I lied, or no, I didn't. Those are the only two paths that lead to real accountability. Anything less, anything loaded with spin, avoidance, or passive language, only deepens the distrust. People are tired of being spoken to like they can't understand plain truth. They deserve more than vague responses crafted to dodge responsibility. It's not enough to say mistakes were made, or that information was evolving. That may be part of the story, but it's not the full truth unless you admit what you knew, when you knew it, and why you said what you said. Clarity is the only path forward now. If you were wrong but acted in good faith, say so. If you misled people intentionally, then that must be faced too. There is no healing without acknowledgement, no redemption without accountability. People can handle the truth. What they can't handle is being treated like they don't deserve it. They can process disappointment, even betrayal, if it comes with sincerity. But if all they hear is polished denial and evasion, the damage to the public trust will only grow deeper and more permanent. They need to see you step into the light, not because you're forced to, but because it's right. Leadership is not about being flawless. It's about being responsible, especially when things go wrong. That's where your legacy will be written, not in the moments when everything went well, but in how you face the moments when you're being held to account. This is where people find out who you really are, not who you pretend to be when the cameras are rolling and the applause is easy. So this is the choice: be remembered as someone who stood up when it mattered, who faced the consequences of their actions and spoke with honesty even when it hurt, or be remembered as someone who chose silence, spin, and self-preservation over truth. That's the real fork in the road, and it's not just about your story. It's about the precedent you set for everyone who comes after you. The nation may not be asking for perfection, but it is absolutely demanding the truth. You owe them that, not just because of who you are, but because of what your position represents. If you ever believed in public service, in honor, or in leadership, then the time to show it is now. Speak clearly. Speak honestly, and let the chips fall where they may, because only then can we begin to repair what has been broken. You can't rewrite history, no matter how much you might want to. What's been said has been said. What's been done has been done. The damage, the consequences, the ripple effects, those are already in motion. But what you can do is face it. You can choose not to run from it, not to bury it beneath layers of excuses or half answers. Because there's a point where denial turns into disrespect, not just of the facts, but of the people who lived through them. History doesn't change, but how you respond to it does matter. It defines who you are and what you stand for. When everything is on the line, the easy route is to protect your own image, to rewrite the narrative, to pretend it wasn't as bad as it really was. But that path only widens the gap between you and the people you were supposed to serve. It tells them their experience doesn't matter, that the truth is negotiable, and that accountability is optional. Telling the truth is not weakness, it's not surrender, it's strength. It's a signal that you respect the people enough to speak to them honestly, even if it makes you uncomfortable. Real courage isn't standing tall when everything's going your way. Real courage is facing the mirror when everything's fallen apart, and still having the guts to own what you see staring back. It's uncomfortable. It's humbling, but it's necessary. Leadership, in its truest form, is about standing in front of the people and saying, "I was wrong," if that's what's required, not because you've been cornered, not because it's politically smart, but because it's morally right. The truth doesn't always protect your position, but it protects your integrity. And when your position is long gone, integrity is the only thing you'll have left. People remember who was honest with them, even if the truth hurt. If you choose to continue hiding behind silence, vague language, or calculated phrasing, you're not leading, you're avoiding, and avoidance is easy. It doesn't take any real strength to pretend something never happened. But the people out there don't have the luxury of avoidance. They have to live with the impact of the decisions that were made based on what they were told, and they don't get to rewrite that story either. So now the question becomes simple. Will you keep trying to control the narrative, or will you finally tell it straight? Will you risk discomfort for the sake of honesty? Because leadership isn't about being untouchable. It's about being transparent. The people watching already know the truth. They're just waiting to hear whether you're brave enough to say it out loud. In the end, history will record not just what happened, but how you responded to it. It will note whether you stood tall or shrank back, whether you chose the truth or chose to bury it. You may not be able to change what happened, but you can absolutely change what happens next. That decision is yours, and it will echo far longer than any speech ever could. This is bigger than your reputation. This is about something much deeper, something that cuts into the very core of what leadership is supposed to mean. When someone is placed in a position of influence, their words carry weight beyond imagination. They shape opinions, dictate actions, and create real-world consequences. The nation didn't just hear what you said, they trusted it, and when that trust is damaged, it doesn't just affect how people feel. It affects how they live. This moment is not about preserving an image or salvaging what's left of a legacy. It's about confronting a question that the people can no longer ignore. Did you lie to the nation? Not did you twist the truth a little, not did you choose your words poorly, not did you speak too soon, but did you knowingly say something false, because there's a difference between being mistaken and being deceptive, and the people deserve to know which one it was. You've had time to think, time to watch the consequences unfold, time to reflect on how your words were received and how they impacted the lives of millions. So the choice now is whether to face that impact head on or continue to sidestep it. And make no mistake, the silence, the spin, the avoidance, they all speak volumes. They tell people that preserving power is more important than owning up to the truth, but there's still a way forward. You can choose to step into the light and speak plainly. You can admit what happened, explain how and why it happened, and show that you understand the depth of what was lost in the process. That might not undo the damage, but it begins to rebuild what really matters: credibility, accountability, and a connection with the people that is built on truth, not illusion. People aren't asking you to be perfect. They're not expecting you to have seen every outcome or predicted every result. What they want is honesty. What they deserve is for someone in your position to treat them with enough respect to speak without a mask. Because at the end of the day, the truth is going to come out. It always does. The only thing left to determine is whether you'll be the one to speak it or whether others will have to uncover it for you. You've stood in the spotlight, you've had the microphone, you've commanded attention, made statements, and set the tone. But now the spotlight isn't there to amplify you. It's there to expose you, and what it reveals depends entirely on what you choose to say next. If you step forward and own the truth, you show people that even in failure, there can be integrity. Even in error, there can be dignity. So I'll ask one last time, and this time the country expects a real answer. Did you lie to the nation, or are you finally ready to stop hiding, stop deflecting, and say exactly what needs to be said? Because the people aren't just waiting for closure, They're waiting for courage. And in this moment, that courage can only come from you.